We have chapter 5 and 6 of the Vampires Don't Wear Polka Dots today. So remember, at the end of chapter 4, that was when Mrs. Jeepers screeched her fingernails down the chalkboard. Ooh, I can hardly read it without creeping out. Okay, so we're going to be on to chapter 5 now, and it's called Hip Wiggles. I wonder what that means. Hip Wiggles. Eddie couldn't believe how well the class was behaving. It really bothered him. Nobody had thrown a paper wad or spitball for days. It was as if Mrs. Jeepers had turned everyone into a goody-goody. Everyone but Eddie. Eddie hated being good. It made him sick. He was just itching to cause some trouble. He leaned over and poked Howie in the ribs. How about switching everybody's pencils when they're not looking? Shh, Mrs. Jeepers might hear, Howie warned. Well, how about, Eddie started. Shh, Howie shook his head no. Eddie turned away in disgust. Howie used to be so much fun. Now he was just another student under Mrs. Jeepers' goodness spell. Eddie reached in front of him and pulled one of Melody's pigtails. Ow, quit that, Melody whispered. Bet you can't make me, Eddie dared as he pulled the other pigtail. If you don't quit, I'll tell Mrs. Jeepers, Melody warned. So see if I care, Eddie sneered, but he stopped pulling her pigtails. He tried to work on his science assignment, but his heart wasn't in it. Eddie walked up to the front of the room and wiggled his hips, making a couple of girls giggle. He stuck his already sharp pencil in the pencil sharpener. He turned the sharpener quickly and kept time by wiggling his hips. A few more people giggled, but not enough to make Eddie happy. Eddie dropped his pencil and crawled all over the front of the classroom, looking for it. He started bumping into chairs and feeling things as if he were blind. People were really watching now, and some were laughing. Eddie was having a great time, until he felt a hand on his shoulder. The hand had bright green fingernails, and it squeezed his shoulder, lifting him off the floor. All of a sudden, Eddie found himself looking into Mrs. Jeepers' eyes. Her green eyes flashed, and then she said softly, "That is quite enough." Should we read one more? That was super short, wasn't it? Chapter 6, A Dare. Eddie stayed quiet for the rest of the day, and he kept an eye on Mrs. Jeepers. The rest of the class watched her too. Something was suspicious about their new teacher, no doubt about it. Nobody could forget the way her eyes had flashed at Eddie. At last the bell rang, and Mrs. Jeepers smiled her odd little half-smile. "Class is dismissed for today," she said. Liza waved her hand in the air. "What about homework, Mrs. Jeepers? Don't you want to assign anything?" Nobody groaned or said a word. Mrs. Jeepers looked at her class. They were sitting up straight, waiting for her reply. "I believe we've worked enough for today. I do not think a homework assignment will be necessary. You are dismissed." Several students sighed with relief, but nobody said a word until they had left the building. Once outside, they gathered around the old oak tree. A few leaves drifted to the ground and crunched under the children's feet. "That lady is definitely weird," Melody said. "I don't like the way her eyes flashed at Eddie. I think she's trouble." Howie nodded. "I think we've definitely met our match." What are you guys talking about?" Eddie said. "You're acting like a bunch of sissies." "Then how come you acted so scared of her today?" Howie asked. "I wasn't scared. No teacher can scare me," Eddie shouted. "If you weren't scared, then why did you give up?" Melody asked. "Yeah, and why did your face turn as white as cotton when she touched your shoulder at the pencil sharpener? How do you explain that?" Howie asked. "I wasn't scared," Eddie sniffed. "I just didn't feel good, that's all. I think I'm probably coming down with the flu." Melody sat down on the grass in a fit of giggles. "Eddie, you were scared, plain and simple." Eddie's face wasn't white now. It turned as red as an apple. "I am not scared of Mrs. Jeepers," he said, "and I'll be glad to prove it to you." His friend stopped laughing and looked long and hard at Eddie. "Are you sure you know what you're saying, Eddie?" Liza asked softly. "We'd all understand if you want to change your mind." "I am not a sissy like you guys, and I'll prove it. You just tell me how." Howie was the first one to speak. He talked slowly, choosing his words with care. "I'll tell you what, Eddie. If you find out what's in that big box in her basement, Then we'll know you're not bluffing. Everybody looked at Howie. Are you crazy, Howie? Liza asked. He'd have to sneak into her basement to find out what's in that box. Exactly, Howie said. But I think Eddie's too chicken to do it. Am not, Eddie snapped. I'll find out what's in that box. Melody looked thoughtfully at Eddie. How will we know that Eddie really does it? What's the matter? Don't you trust me? Eddie sneered. Of course not, Melody said. Nobody does. Well, if that's how you feel, you can come with me. Then you'll know I'm not lying. Or are you a scaredy cat? Melody glared at Eddie. I can do anything you can. We'll go tonight, she said. Then she turned and walked away. So do you think they're going to go in there? And if they do, is she going to catch them? And what do you think they'll find if they go in the box? What might be in there? All right. Good chapters today.